I started from the question of how come some people enjoy other people's suffering? And then how come other people in the same society are just the opposite? They get their joy not in believing that there's bad people that need to be punished, but they get their joy in contributing to people's well-being. The first thing I'll suggest is you can't teach anybody anything. And to have that as an objective is itself to create problems. So let's change the objective. Let's never try to teach anybody anything or to change anybody. If that's your objective, you'll create resistance. Saying what we don't want doesn't make clear what we do want. But worse than that, if we frame our objectives in getting rid of something, it leads to violence very often. It makes violence seem attractive when we try to get rid of something. Behind every feeling, there is a need. When she hears your needs without hearing any criticism or demand, and you hear her needs without any criticism and demand, the solution will find you. The conflict will resolve itself. It does need to be resolved. But what most of us do, we skip this and go right to here. Needs contain no reference to specific ways of getting the needs met. Those are preferences or strategies or requests. So we make a big difference between needs and between preferences, requests, strategies. All needs are universal. Every human being in the world has the same needs. I'm not doing it for money. I'm not doing it to get a positive report card. I'm doing it because something that has increased joy in my life, it's joyful to share it with others. It's a fun game. It's the most fun game I've ever found, contributing to people's well-being. I'm really confident it's the most fulfilling game we human beings will ever find.
Welcome to the Igniting Compassion show. My name is Katrina Vaillancourt, and I'm your host for this show. I am also the creator of the Love Smart cards and just an enthusiast for nonviolent communication. This work has made such a difference in my life, so I'm delighted to be sharing it with all of you. This show is also hosted by Spirituality Gone Wild, which is a just amazing platform. I just want to show you quickly. Spirituality Gone Wild is an online community dedicated to raising the levels of compassion, gratitude, love, kindness, and peace on earth. You can learn more about Spirituality Gone Wild and their membership at spiritualitygonewild.com. And today I am just so excited to have a very special guest. We have Rochelle Lamb with us today. And I was looking at Rochelle's website to learn about her, of course, before the show. I discovered that not only does she have a passion for this work, she's also creates poetry, really beautiful poetry. She's going to share a piece of that with us today. And she's a photographer, so she has some amazing work on her website. And as I looked at her bio, I noticed that the testimonials about Rochelle really introduce her in such a powerful way. So I wanted to share with you some of the testimonials of who Rochelle is before I introduce you to her live here. So I'm going to bring up that first testimonial right here. Initially rooted in nonviolent communication, Rochelle has taken her approach in a radically different direction. She recognizes that before we can learn to navigate conflict, we must first recognize how deeply our language creates separation, and further, how we are embedded in a culture that has lost its moorings from the wild and living world. Rochelle teaches you how to relearn the language of life, placing humans back within the web of interconnection rather than the center. Since her teaching, I've found deeper clarity within myself and more connection with others. Being guided by Rochelle, Whether in the realms of communication, conflict resolution, personal growth, or organizational wellness and health, you will be irrevocably transformed. There is no putting the butterfly back into the caterpillar. And I just love this picture here, learning a disciplined labor of love. And with that, I am so excited to be introducing you to Rochelle Lamb. Hi, Rochelle. So good to have you here with us this morning. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Wow. As I had shared with you when we spoke earlier last week, there were so many pieces on your website that are beautiful gifts. And I definitely want to touch on many of those gifts as we go through the show. And I thought we might kick off the show. I wanted to read something that I saw on your website that was really moving to me. And perhaps that could be a point of initiation for our conversation.
Sure.
It says, mainstream culture teaches us to see life primarily in terms of resources. There are profound consequences to seeing life in this way, many of which accrue directly to our relationships. Most of us need to unlearn and retrain in order to overcome well-established enculturation habits that tragically normalize alienating and power over ways of relating with each other.
Good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really appreciating this idea of enculturation habits that we need to overcome in order to embody this sense of compassionate consciousness, to have naturally compassionate action. And I'm wondering if you might be able to help us understand more. What do you mean by enculturation habits, and how is that getting in the way?
Well, let me pull one of Marshall's quotes for you that goes right along with that. Is domination cultures teach us a way of thinking that serves the culture, not life. It serves the structure, not life. Mm-hmm. So it serves the structure. And so you could look at it this way. All of us, I'm pretty sure all of us, I don't know anybody who doesn't have this going on, all of us learn to speak before we learn to think and reason. And it's a good idea to consider the implications of this, because what it means is that we are ultimately at the mercy of our caregivers and our culture when it comes to learning how to speak and how to relate. I don't know any other way. And so given that we're so vulnerable, and we're like sponges, we just take all of this in. And as Marshall would speak about how the culture teaches us to enjoy violence. And, Marshall would be then speaking about television, but now we can just go to YouTube. You don't even have to turn on a television. It can be streamed to you at any particular time of day. Mm-hmm. So that's the enculturation. It's everything that is coming into us. And we really don't have the capacity to think about it. And I'm not even suggesting that we should, but there's a point where it's a really good idea to do it. Mm-hmm. Start to ask ourselves questions. Why is something that I'm seeking, I'm wanting to be connected, why is it so elusive? Mm-hmm. It's so elusive for so many people. And if you think about right now with the pandemic, and even though people have these, there's smartphones, whatever gadgets and devices that they have, all of these, which are, there to increase connection, or people speak about it, yet at the same time, creating separation. We've all seen the pictures, two people sitting in a restaurant or more, and they're both looking at their phones, but what's happening to them? They're not in conversation anymore. Mm-hmm. The irony, the great irony of it. And yet It's so hard. If you forget your phone, right? It's almost like you have phantom limb and you're like, where is it? I have to have it. It seems like, it's an essential part of our lives now.
Sure.
It used to be.
Sure. Well, and so I noticed how you were talking about how there's a glorification of violence that happens. Certainly we can see it in the media. We can see that, news often tells us the bad news, and movie shows, can glorify violence in the most creative ways.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in our own lives, there's so often I hear people say, well, nonviolent communication, I'm not violent, I don't hit anyone. And so I'm wondering if you might speak to how you actually see glorification of violence that is, it's not physical violence necessarily, but does still show up in communication.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's so much in that question. And first of all, what I'd like to point to, and I'm going to sort of step away from the interpersonal, is that we're not aware of the deep level of separation. And one of the ways that we could become more aware is, for instance, if you look at a price tag on anything, what we see is a dollar figure. What we very rarely see, well, we never see, I've never seen it, is what is the actual cost to get something to us, a particular convenience to us. And we don't usually follow the thread. We're not finding out where something was grown, who transported it, what getting it has meant to the particular place, the land base where this thing is created for us. And so all of these things, we're separated from it. And I really do believe that if we were more connected to life and I'm speaking beyond the human life, if we were connected to life, we just wouldn't be able to do much of the things that we do. And a lot of it becomes normalized. So what's an example of something being normalized that could be violent? I don't want to point names, but we can just say that anytime we go and pick up a coffee from a place and the paper cup and the coffee that's in it, we don't know the story of it. And if we could know the story of things, I think we'd become much more conscientious, much more aware. So that's one way that violence is normalized. And I can go into so many different layers. I can speak about what does a crib do? I'm speaking about a crib to a baby. And how are we connected? Because we're human creatures. And if we look back over thousands of years, human beings have been very social and have had skin-to-skin contact ongoingly. Our survival depended on it. And now that our survival doesn't depend on it so vividly or obviously, but it does. Our capacity to love and remain connected and to be connected to the whole wide web. It's so vitally important.
I'm deeply appreciating what you're saying here, and it really fits with that first testimonial, how you really take a radically different approach to nonviolent communication. Because oftentimes in my study of nonviolent communication, it's been deeply about this interpersonal. How am I relating to my beloved or family members or friends? And you're actually looking at this whole web of life. How am I relating to the purchases I make? And am I aware of everything that came together for that product to be on the shelf and potentially in my basket? Am I aware of the impact to the earth? Am I aware of the impact to various people or animals who may have been involved in the creation of that product, whatever it is? And so I'm really hearing a profound level of desire to be in embodied compassionate consciousness. It sounds like, every time you grocery shop, which I imagine could be overwhelming at times, to be that aware.
Yeah. Yeah. And yet this isn't new. I don't think maybe I'm framing it in a particular way, or I'm trying to bring more attention to it, but I'll just take, for instance, this book, The Heart of Social Change, How to Make a Difference in Your World. And this is written by Marshall. And on needs, he says, it is hard to separate meeting human needs from the needs of the environment. They are one and the same, meeting the needs of all the phenomena on the planet, seeing the oneness of it all, seeing the beauty in that whole scheme, that whole interdependent scheme of life. So he's already saying it. It's not new, but I think we take it in quite abstractly or theoretically, and we have an appreciation for it. We say, "Oh, I love nature." What I find so healing is to go for a walk in the woods. But even there's a separation that's there. Many people, many cultures wouldn't even have the word nature, for instance, because they don't even see that separation. I'm of this world, and that tree is my relative. You can't, it's a whole, it would be a real challenge for anybody who really loves something to destroy that place. And we know, I mean, it's tragic how much of the world and how many, the Amazon rainforest, the bleaching of coral, all of these things that are happening, and they're directly connected to our ability to live and to be with each other. And they do, I believe they find their way into our interactions with each other on a level. I think it's very profound. If we're disconnected from the whole story of life, how will we be with each other? And yeah, I'm sure we can have beautiful connections with each other, but that piece is so important. And right now, in the year 2020, I think we're getting the news, whether or not people are recognizing it and tying these things together. I don't know, but I know there are plenty of people who do. And that's a great thing.
This is truly a ripe topic for spirituality gone wild, because it's in some ways what you're saying is so radical, and in other ways it's radical that we've separated ourselves in such a profound way, that we've created this sense of otherness that has allowed us to come to this level of crisis as a shared humanity, as a shared life on Earth. So I'm really appreciating again that this is not just about needs awareness, as Marshall Rosenberg and so many people in the nonviolent communication world talk about. It's not just human needs awareness, it's truly full systems, all of life needs awareness. It's a way of connecting into the whole and really allowing ourselves to recognize that, yes, the needs of the earth, the needs of life around us are inherently one and the same with our own needs, that there is this sense of oneness. And with that, to recognize, like, wow, look at the suffering. Look at the suffering that's here. And I know that you have a powerful teaching around suffering. You're talking about the environmental degradation, about babies being put in cribs rather than having the skin-to-skin contact. Now, with the challenges that we have around the coronavirus, there's a physical distancing that we're doing with each other. There's less human connection. We're experiencing, certainly suffering currently. There's always been some suffering in the world, but we're seeing it on a global scale, and no doubt also having that in our personal relationships. And I'm wondering, what is it that you could share with us about the value of suffering?
Well, it is the first noble truth in Buddhist understanding, that everything suffers. That's by virtue of being born in a physical body that can experience pain. And so one of the things I think we need to be really careful of is that, and this can happen in an NVC, the enthusiasm that people first have when they come to nonviolent communication. Oh, I can speak about my feelings and I have needs. This is so awesome. But it's good to temper that and to have some awareness that just because I don't feel good in this moment doesn't necessarily mean that things aren't working out. So, and that's a challenge, I think, for many of us, because here's one of the things our culture is also teaching us, and you can see it in the self-help section of any bookstore, is or the motivational practices that people have. You can have anything you want. Dream big. If you have a dream, just follow it. Now, what this doesn't say is beware of that everything that you do has impact in the world, and that all the creatures have needs. And so make sure that as you're moving towards this dream that you cherish, you're also taking all of that into consideration. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to go straight to grief. I remember someone asking Marshall a question during a workshop. And the question was this: Marshall, what's it going to take to really change things? And his answer was so profound. I thought it was. I still remember it. He said, mourning, a lot of mourning. And Marshall regularly spoke about the work of Joanna Macy, who does grief work. And it's important to recognize that a lot of times our love shows up that way. I love something, and then when that thing goes, whether it's the end of a relationship, or whether it's the death of someone I love, or it's the death of my cat or my dog, or it's the death of somebody on another continent who I don't know. There's, of course there's feeling involved in that, but there's also the willingness to know that that is how things are at times, and that everything does end. And so becoming aware and of endings, that's part of life, not pushing them away. Then what that does is it reduces the likelihood of me throwing a tantrum. Yeah.
Mm. Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. I'm just sitting with that one right now. Because of course there is such a tendency to want to feel good, mm-hmm. and to have our own needs met. And certainly throwing a tantrum might meet my own needs for self-expression and for mourning, but has impact on those around me. And also really is demonstrating a challenge with acceptance, with some of those more tender emotions that can happen when there is an experience that does not match our dreams, so to speak, that anything is possible, vision or of what could happen in reality. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you might share with us an illustration of how you've seen this play out in your personal world or with clients, this teaching to really embrace the suffering and enter into the mourning as a path of compassion, and as something that can support us to live according to our values, to live a meaningful life.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I do when I'm working with people, and let's just say it's a couple, for instance, because, couples will come to me and they'll be distressed because, we're suffering from poor communication, and often they each think it's the other person's fault. Yeah. And they do take some responsibility, but by and large, if only the other person would smarten up, then everything would be good. So one of the things I like to do is to paint a picture of, or just establish that their relationship does not exist in isolation. It lives within a greater ecosystem. And that is a cultural one. And in this day and age, many times what's occurring is there is way too much burden or expectation placed on a relationship, where in the past, and even in the fairly recent past, in say, for instance, extended families, people had recourse to other people or other means, or even, you could say, whether or not you agree with religion, that was a solid cornerstone in many people's lives. So they would have their faith. They had other places to turn to instead of it all falling to this beloved who's going to take care of all my needs. And so I think oftentimes when people are expressing the fact that their needs aren't being met in a relationship, those needs are actually being misplaced. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a couple and a marriage. You know, it takes a village, period. And the fact that we don't have that is a challenge for most people. So I like to just point that out. This is a grief, because you can do what you can to create community, but it can never replace the very real sense of belonging to a place and a people that eludes us. You know, people are on the move and they think it's great. It's great. I get to do whatever I want. I get to go wherever I want. And it's great until it's not, because there's a consequence to that. Mm-hmm. So I like to just establish that the couple, it's much bigger than what they think it is. You know, mm-hmm. And when we establish that, it has a way of kind of having them see what's going on between them in a different way. It doesn't mean that they don't have challenges, and we do work with those. Mm-hmm. But it makes them suddenly more compassionate towards each other. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, like this is hard. This is a pretty messed up situation. It was messed up before we even met each other, you know? Yes. So let's go easy on each other. Let's go easy on ourselves. And that's a compassion that arises from the willingness to know life's challenges, or life is hard, and it's not something you're going to be able to correct by coming to see me. Not that, but you leave with some awareness that's very useful, and then new tools of how to speak about it. Mm-hmm.
It definitely sounds like a very powerful distinction to start with. You know, this couple, and they're pointing fingers at each other. You know, if you would change, then you would be meeting my needs better. Both of them having that dance with each other, painful dance with each other, and then helping them see the context that relationship has not been this way throughout time. We've generally been in family systems or community systems or spiritual systems, so that we had, I would imagine, a whole lot less needs of our spouse or our chosen person, and many more of those needs were covered by other members of the community. So we've created this unusual strain on relationship, and these very high standards. No doubt the media and our movies, especially our romantic ones, have helped us to create these ideas of how our beloved should be. And so one of the pieces that you do is simply to help people understand that we can, I would imagine that we can look to get our needs met, not necessarily from each other all the time, but to be aware of each other's needs and to maybe diversify our strategies for meeting some of those needs, so that we're not always maybe putting pressure on each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we often come to each other fairly traumatized, whether we know it or not. But these days, I think there's a lot that, trauma is quite the buzzword. So, and there's a lot of suffering that comes from the multitude of separations that just haven't occurred within our own personal lives, but culturally, historically, there's a lot of things that have occurred, and we're so much more acquainted with separation and disconnection than we are with deep connection. I mean, one of the things I often suggest is go outside and lie down on the ground for at least 30 minutes and look up at the sky and get in touch with how small you are. It's an interesting thing, because in a relationship and in the conversations, we're often trying to puff ourselves up. I mean, we do it by saying, and I have a need for this, and I have a need for that, and and instead of realizing, wow, life is short, and we're one tiny particle in this incredibly gorgeous mosaic, and to take care of that, to remember where our life comes from. And it actually doesn't come from other people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it comes from the food on your plate. You know, if you take people away, you can survive. I'm not saying, maybe it's a good idea. I don't know, but we do have the need for social connection and interaction. But what sustains us is the air, the water, the food, and these things. I think I think people are doing it now and experiencing a lot more contentedness in their own lives
Mm-hmm.
by connecting with all their relations and
Mm-hmm.
speaking the ones that are not human. And,
Mm-hmm.
and then that will release the stress load that gets placed on the relationship.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm really appreciating that. I know I've had teachers before who have suggested go out and hug a tree. You're feeling stressed, go out and hug a tree. And it feels very similar to that idea of laying on the earth, just
Yeah.
on the earth, looking up at the sky, feeling the vastness of life, and starting to reattune ourselves to that we are inherently interconnected with all of life, that life is not all about this other person and the way they're behaving and what needs are met and are not met in relationship to this one person. So I'm appreciating that is one of the ways to set a foundation for relieving some of the stress and creating more ease
Mm-hmm.
in a relational dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And doing things together that aren't so much based on humans. Whether it's gardening. I mean, gardening is a wonderful way to get in touch with the cycles of life and with the seasons and with death. Because everything that's in the earth comes from what has preceded it and died, and so it's a way to also become have some humility. The word humility, the word comes from etymologically humus, which is earth. So it's a way to just bring us back together. And I know that one of the things that has occurred over the past number of months, especially in the springtime, at least in the northern hemisphere, was that numerous people were gardening, and they hadn't done it before because they were in lockdown. And so they started to do that. And what a blessing to be able to do that. Not only that, but it's probably one of the most important things to know how to do now is to grow your own food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's been a great tool for my beloved and I. We have spent a lot of time out in the garden this season.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely feeling that as another way to relieve stress and to do something in partnership where you're focused on a project together, not necessarily focused on each other, except for maybe a hug here and there. Are you thirsty or something like that? But it's nice. The focus becomes partnership on a goal and a connection with the earth. It's a great tool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend it. Any other kind of handiwork too, anything that connects us to our old ones, whether that's Braiding Sweetgrass, which is, by the way, an excellent book by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and or knitting or weaving or carpentry or cooking. And I don't mean preparing a quick meal, but just really savoring what our hands can do.
Mm-hmm.
Slows us down too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it really slows us down.
Yeah. Again, I'm just really appreciating how you have brought the conversation of nonviolent communication into this holistic inquiry of how do we get connected to life? How do we get connected to that greater whole?
Mm-hmm.
It's feeling very nourishing just talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would imagine that you also have couples who, they're connecting with the earth, they're gardening, maybe their stress has gone down a little bit, but they still have, I'll say, a thorn in their side, so to speak, in regards to something that is happening, and they're just like frustrated by it. It's maybe incomplete, unresolved, and agitating. And so I'm wondering what you might suggest. And I know this is a generalization, because we're not looking at a specific topic. But if you can give us another gift in terms of what you might suggest when there's two people who are having some kind of challenge. I guess one of the things that comes to mind, I know that there are people who are having challenges around finances right now. The circumstances have created quite the financial stress for a number of people. So I know that can be a very difficult topic, and I'm wondering what you might have to offer.
Yeah. So let's hone in. Let's make up a little scenario here. Are you, or get more specific? Let's imagine a scenario. For instance, is it about the fact that someone has lost their job due to COVID, or is it maybe somebody doesn't like how somebody's spending money? Let's go with that one. Somebody, they don't like how the other person is spending money, especially now given COVID. So one, you have one partner who's quite relaxed about everything. Oh, things will be fine. But the other one is quite anxious about things. And so both of them will assume that they both have their jobs, but they don't have the sense of security that they once had. And I would say this is probably true for everyone. I don't think there's anybody, unless somebody is very well insulated financially, who doesn't have some concern about what does the long term look like. Every day is a mystery, right? So how to support people having that conversation? One of the ways I work with people is really the way Marshall worked with people. I say to the couple, okay, who wants to go first? Because I'm going to be the other person. I always play the other person. You let me know, what is it that I'm doing that you're finding really challenging regarding money, And so then I will respond in a way that the other person doesn't or can't, hasn't seen done before, because typically what happens is people get defensive in their conversations. So we'll start with the person who says, yeah, I'm, you're spending money all the time. You don't seem to get it. You look around in the world, do you not see what's happening? Okay. So how do we respond empathically to that person? Would be something like, whoa, yeah, I'm hearing how anxious you're feeling, and that you have a need for some awareness around how we spend our resources. Have I got that right? Yeah. You just think it's like, money grows on trees. That's what you're doing. Okay. So here's the thing I want to point out is people often say, okay, well, what do I do now? Well, you just keep empathizing. Here's the thing. The person actually said yes to you. They agree with what you've said to them. They say, yeah. And on top of that, you think money grows on trees. Okay. So you stay with it. Yeah. Oh. So again, you have a need for some awareness of just how hard money can be to come by, and you want to protect our resources. You see, when I'm working with couples, they don't speak to each other that way. So, and I don't think couples are actually supposed to work things out all by themselves. I really don't. I think what I'm doing now is, okay, I'm going to step in as part of the village. It's a very emaciated configuration. But it's better than just the two of them hashing it out. So I'll show up and I will speak to what actually is a concern for both of them. That's what I've spoken to, the awareness and protection of our financial resources. Both people have that need, but they get so caught up and tight, and basically they're pushing each other's defensiveness buttons. And so it becomes really hard. So my job is to just come in and bring some ease to that, point out what it is that's important. And there's a grief in it too, because uncertainty has always been the way of the world. However, now we really feel it. It's because, the truth of the matter is, any day because we're flesh and blood, any day we can get ill. Any day something could hurt us, or we could get hit by we could be in an accident. This could happen any day. Every day is a good day to die.
So, and every day is a great day to live as well.
But I'm choosing that, because that's a First Nations, it's a good day to die, actually is a recognition of the fact that it tells me I better live my day well today, just like you said. And so if we don't keep that awareness of death in there, it actually, there's zero pressure on us to even live a good day. Because, I don't do it today, I can do it tomorrow. This always putting things off, So there's something to be said for acknowledging the real vulnerability of a human body, a human being. So, and you can see too how people, I won't say any names, but a leader in your country has recently said, don't be afraid of this, and I feel better than I have in 20 years. And what I would suggest is happening there is I don't want to feel vulnerable. I don't know what a person does with the thought of recognizing, no, you will die someday. Given that you're in your mid-70s, come on now. I have spoken to people who are in their 70s, and when I ask them about what do they make of the rest of their life, and oftentimes people will speak as if it will never end. And I kid you not. Well, I have plans to do this when I'm 80, and I figure, geez, by the time you're in your mid-70s, are you not wondering about whether or not you'll make it that far? Don't get me wrong, I hope you do, but I think your life will be deeper if you consider that this is not only, it's probable, it's not, it's gonna happen. So how are we living our life? And this is why the culture, or I'll speak about the death phobia of the culture, actually affects us in our relationships too. Because it's so easy now to take things for granted, because life is going to go on forever, right? And they told us we can have what we want, right? Well, we can go after what we want because we have needs to self-express, right? I got it, right? No, it's not it. That's a lovely moment, and I'm not saying don't have those moments, but make sure they're grounded, make sure they're rooted in the realities of life, which comes back to that first noble truth. Everything suffers because everything dies. And for me, that enriches my life. I remember Marshall saying, if we truly get this process, we'd be crying 24 hours a day.
How do they want that? Do that for a while, but
the time in sorrow. So, and maybe, I don't even know that it's a 50-50 all the time. Sometimes it's a little more on the joy side and sometimes it's a little more on the sorrow side. And, these days it's really hard to read the news and not be, wow, this is very hard now for all of us. And, we spoke about hope the other day, right?
We did.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I don't know about the thing that gives me hope. It's not what I see happening. It would give me hope if I saw all of us going, we're in trouble. We need to really stop and reevaluate this whole thing and, what we call the good life. Then I would have that thing called hope. I don't have it now because I don't see that happening. I know some people do it, so I tend to hang out with them, But this doesn't stop me from, loving life or contributing or recognizing my responsibility of citizenship in a world that needs citizenship.
Definitely.
more than it needs my personal gifts, I would say. You know, if the two converge, that's great, you know, but yeah.
That's having me look back on this thing about fear. And, you know, I recognize there's kind of for me, a balancing act with fear. If I get into a place of fear and I'm just stuck there, I'm not all that useful in life. I'm not being a functional citizen. I'm probably not taking care of my health. I'm probably not really in touch with the people I love and showing up for them, right? There's a bit of the fear creates the frontal lobes to shut down and for you to be more in the fight, flight, freeze part of your brain response. And so I'm looking for what's this balance of acknowledging fear, but not in a way that can you like paralyze us, so to speak, from living that full life. What's that key for recognizing, yes, there is impermanence, there is suffering, and what a blessing. I can breathe. What a blessing. There's food on the table. There's somebody I love nearby. And if there isn't, I can contact somebody I love. What a blessing. You know, how do we find that balance? Because I'm really hearing, of course, the importance of not pushing away the suffering or saying the fear doesn't exist, you know, denying the challenges that we have in our world. But at the same time, you know, I don't want to be paralyzed by that. I want to be motivated into action that really stems from my heart and my joy to be alive. Just curious if you have any thoughts about how to maintain that balance so that you're honoring the fear and the suffering and using it really to catapult this engagement with the web of life.
This question is such a perfect, beautiful, and relevant question. Yeah. So Joanna Macy, she says, the most radical thing any of us can do at this time is to be fully present to what is happening in the world. And yet doing that, as you say, can bring up fear in people. So I'm going to just tease out the word fear or look at it a little bit, because there's the fear, I would say there's healthy fears and there's unhealthy fears. So I would say, you know, a healthy fear is, you know, when you turn on the stove, you don't stick your hand on the element because you know you would burn doing that. So that's a healthy, you know, fear. But I mean, you're not terrorized by it. It's just it's more of an awareness, right? And if you see a small child going towards a hot stove or a hot fire, you know, your impulse is to want to protect. Okay, so that's fear operating in a very healthy way. And then there's fear that I would call negative hope. Okay, so it's simply you're imagining what will happen. And one of the criticisms that some people have of hope, and I think they're well worth considering, is that in some cases, hope can give you the sense that actually everything's okay and you don't need to do anything. And fear can shut you down similarly, where you go, well, okay, what's the point? You give up. So the two are they kind of operate together in a particular way. And so I really would encourage a level of practicality around things. You know, just look at what's there and address it. So I think it's the ability to be responsible, to be able to respond to what's occurring to us in the moment. And are we willing to look at what's happening in the moment? You know, I'll go back to, you know, death and just speak about when people are with someone who's dying, because this is something I've seen several times, is that they actually won't speak about dying because there's this idea that a miracle will happen. No, the miracle has happened. They were alive for as long as they were, and now they're leaving. They're fulfilling the rest of the transaction, you know. And so but people not wanting to talk about it actually generates more fear because we're not placing our attention in the right place. And I think all of us have had this. I mean, it's kind of procrastination can operate this way, you know, where you put off doing something, you don't want to do it, or you don't like what you're going to learn about yourself or what it's going to put you through. And yet people often find that just doing the thing itself was nowhere near as close as horrifying as they imagined it would be. Yeah.
I'm really appreciating that. Something I'm hearing clearly in that is this reminder to be in the present moment, be with what is now, because when we're projecting a future that makes us frightened, that can be an unhealthy spin. It can spin us into a state where we're no longer present. We're no longer practical. We're no longer actually communicating with the person in front of us because part of our mind is somewhere else. And so I'm really appreciating that grounded sense of be here now, respond to what's here now. And with that, I'm feeling like this is a good segue into talking about your workshop a bit, because I know sometimes in our relationships there's something we want to talk about, but we're afraid to bring it up. And maybe we're so frightened to bring it up, we have ideas of how it's going to go and how it's going to go wrong. And so oftentimes a strategy for ease and peace and harmony is to shove it under the rug. And don't talk about it, and don't talk about it. And maybe then another thing comes up, you shove it under the rug, right? Don't talk about it. And over time, you can't help but to trip over the rug. And that becomes a very dangerous place for a relationship, is when there's so many things you haven't talked about, there's so much built up that the relationship now is in hazard because of that pile up. So I'm really appreciating this workshop that you have coming up. I'm just going to show the flyer here for it, and it's called "Can We Talk About This?" And when you describe the workshop here, you say these are challenging times. No one in mainstream culture is untouched by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're all trying our best to navigate uncertainty, which means the skills of knowing how to get along under stressful conditions is hugely important. Many relationships have felt strains in adjusting to a changing world. This course delivers immediately practical communication skills over 3 Zoom sessions. And it goes on. I'll share more, and then you can tell us what you'd like to about this. Explore a revolutionary approach to speaking up, establishing rapport, and resolving differences. Radically shift your experience of communication with this liberating, transformational, and dynamic practice rooted in spiritual and emotional intelligence. Break through limiting thought and speech patterns established through social conditioning and replace them with a powerful way of communicating that is deeply satisfying, life-honoring, and creatively liberating. Come with an open mind so you can experience the power of life-centered connection with those you love, those you don't love, and the living world that sustains you. Wow. So you've got that coming up. I know that the registration for that is on your website, rachellam.com, which is scrolling at the bottom of our screen here. Is there more that you can tell us about that offering?
Well, it's what I've done, like many people have done, to adapt to, not being able to get together with people. So normally that would be a 2-day workshop over a weekend. And now it's a 1-day, because I do offer 1-day workshops as well, but it's a 1-day workshop spread out over 3 weeks so that people are not in front of their screens for too long. And then there's exercises that people have, and people can get into their little breakout rooms on the Zoom call. We do spend a lot of time just looking at how we've learned separation. And then people do have the opportunity to bring their particular scenarios, and there's like, role plays or live exchanges, where I become the person that they're struggling with, whether it's their 16-year-old, teenager, or their partner or their parent. And there's a lot of learning. It's very rich when that happens, because it's not a defended environment, and so people can feel free to explore some of the challenges they have interpersonally with others, with me, and then go back to the situation with that other person, kind of seeing it much differently. So the role play can do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know that.
Yes, I love the way these workshop experiences they're an opportunity to practice. And like, you can make mistakes with somebody who's just in a workshop with you.
Yeah.
It's the training wheels so that you get to practice how the conversation could go in a way that's different than that enculturation that we've been born and raised into. So, wow, that's a wonderful, wonderful offering you have coming up. I also noticed on your website, there's a number of free downloads that you have. And there's one that I grabbed. This isn't the full one. I wanted to pop it up on the screen just so people can get a sense of some of the tools. And this is one of a handful that Rochelle has on her website, the things we know and often forget. And so, of course, this is a full page of information. And oh my goodness, this looks like the kind of thing you'd want to post on your refrigerator or somewhere, put it in your bathroom, somewhere where you can read it regularly.
Yeah, here's another one that people might like. It's called the Moment of Choice Rescue Card. So when you're in one of those moments where, oh my God, we're on the roller coaster to hell, you pull this out. Despite appearances, I want to work this out with you. That's what it says. But on this side, I would say to the person, I need to stop right now. I'm becoming reactive, defensive. I don't have the level of clarity required to relate to you in a genuinely supportive and productive manner. I'm going to take a time out and would like to revisit this with you once I've regained my composure so I can better hear you and work this out with you. Because in the end, that's what people would like, but they need something to interrupt them. So this is also a handy thing that's on the website. People can download and wallpaper their place with it, whatever they want to do. Yeah.
That is a brilliant tool. I know it's just so common for us, especially in the relationships that are most important to us, to come into some kind of conflict. And before we know it, it's escalated to a point of saying things that we would later regret.
Yeah.
Really, so raised voices and accusations and things that when we're grounded and centered and feeling our love for each other, we would never say. And yet the escalations can happen so quickly. And so I love that you have this tool, because again, it's like the mind can almost go blank. It's like, okay, the only thing I can think of right now are mean things to say. That's not the way I want to show up. What do I do?
Yeah. Well, in the emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman's work, he speaks about how when people are triggered, their blood leaves their brain and it goes to their extremities because they're in the fight, flight, or freeze. So it's just good to know that, and that this happens in a conversation where people are saying, well, I don't agree with you. And so if there's no blood up here, then you can't reason. So take a break, breathe, have the blood get redistributed so then you can actually reason and go, okay, what are the needs? How am I actually feeling? What am I afraid of? All of that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness, we've covered a number of very helpful tools today. I'm feeling really grateful, and I know you have a poem for us.
Yeah, you wanted me to
share. I'd love that.
I did. I printed it off. I'm just looking for, where did I put it? My goodness. Oh, here it is.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, I want to say before I read it that thank you for beginning this conversation with that clip of Marshall. Watching it. Oh, I didn't turn my calendar off. Sorry, it just came up. Anyway, Watching that, I just was moved to tears, remembering how precious I considered that work and still do. And for anybody who has an opportunity to, listen to Marshall, watch his clips, today would definitely be a good day to do it. He would have turned 86 years old today, and I'm so grateful for having met him. And here it is. This is something that I wrote on New Year's Day, and I post it every year, but it applies to every single day. May you fall madly in love this year, in love with someone who unhinges your tired trajectory, in love with a spouse of several years who might be aching for lightning, in love with demanding children and crazy relatives, in love with the particular pedigree of your genius insanity that has perhaps claimed you in spite of your reluctance, and certainly in love with an animal, a cloud, a redwood, the wild, these at least once a day. May you fall in love with this fragile jewel of a world, with hard work, real learning, just causes, petitioning, and prayers. May you fall in love with wonder itself, with the grand mystery, with all that feeds you in order that you may live, and with the responsibility that confers. May you fall in love with heartbreak and seeing how it's stitched into everything. May you fall in love with the natural order of things and with tears, tenderness, and humility. May this be a magnificent year for you. May you fall deeply, madly, hopelessly, inextinguishably in love.
Yummy. Oh, goodness. Thank you, Rochelle, so much for your generous sharing with us all today. I feel really honored to have you here as a guest for the launch of the Igniting Compassion show on Marshall's birthday. What an auspicious day to begin. And it's wonderful to carry the torch of the work that he brought into the world, to have you as a partner in that endeavor. So again, thank you so much. I highly recommend people go to your website, check out these free downloadable tools and her upcoming workshop offering, as well as her coaching services, poetry, and photography. It's a very rich website. So thank you again for being here. It's just a delight to have you.
And thank you too. Thank you.
All right, so we are wrapping up this first Igniting Compassion show. And again, I want to thank our host, Spirituality Gone Wild. It's an amazing community. You can go to spiritualitygonewild.com and check out their membership website. The shows are archived, so you have access to all the shows. There's special membership perks, including workshop offerings and videos that are only for our members. So you definitely want to check that out. And we will look forward to seeing you next week again on this show. And until then, may love bloom in your heart. May you have a beautiful week. And we will see you next week.